Hello, welcome back to my read-along of A Tale of Stars and Shadow. It's been a couple days, so let's jump straight into Chapter 8. He was on edge, though his voice had sounded utterly relaxed as he spoke the password that allowed him access over the bridge to the palace. Humans weren't rare in the citadel, even less so in the palace. Many were employed as servants or worked with the Falcons as smiths, cooks, and cleaners. And it wasn't like the Wing Guard were a highly skilled elite force of warriors. The Falcon he spoke the password to barely looked at him as he waved the Shadowhawk through. Mostly their incompetence roused only scorn and contempt in him, along with a certain amount of relief. It made his activities that much easier to undertake. But sometimes, nagging behind that, was a shiver of worry. Mithraenar's only army would never hold back any serious attempt to take the country. The Shadowhawk rarely came up to the citadel, but he'd felt it was important enough to risk this coming this morning. Narvis's information warranted further investigation, but he didn't want to betray his interest to the information broker. It never paid to appear too interested in anything, and so he needed to do this himself. The fact that the Falcon had chosen an unused barracks far from the busiest area of the palace for the new wing that would be Prince Cuinn's protective detail, one of the human smiths had sent word of its location through the Shadowhawk network, made accessing it much easier. He wouldn't dare risk trying to get closer to the central part of the royal residence in full daylight. Not only was the barracks unused, it was on the opposite side of the hill from the palace's Falcon barracks. Ravani was clever. None of this, the foreigner or a wing made up of humans, was going to be taken well in the winged folk world. The Falcon was clearly sensitive to that. Did that mean he'd had involvement in the foreigner's arrival, or did he just see it as an opportunity? The Shadowhawk shook his head. The man might just be looking to avoid the inconvenience of brawling between Wingguard wings. He slipped through the walkways and stairs, casual, unnoticed. Another Shadowhawk network member had once provided him detailed hand-drawn maps of the palace. Whoever it was had clearly not only understood how to draft architectural plans, but also had a thorough understanding of palace life, because they'd included annotations explaining where the lesser-used routes were and where someone in a servant's uniform would expect to be seen. Such gifts sometimes gave him a chill, wondering why a human would have taken such careful note of such things, led his mind to places he'd rather not think about. Despite his misgivings, he'd memorized the plans, and on the rare occasion he came up here on Shadowhawk business, he used them to get around without being noticed. Today he made it to a deserted walkway that looked down over the barracks assigned to the new wing. Slipping into the shadows of a tree, he went utterly still. There were enough shadows cast by the morning sun that he could easily draw them around his body, making him invisible to anyone giving the tree a passing glance. A small group of men were waiting in the leaf-strewn yard as he settled into position. 4 of them were Dock City humans. He frowned, his unease deepening. What was the Queen thinking, approving a guard of humans for her son? And it had to be her call. There was no way Ravani would have made a move like this on his own. Invite a king shield to Mithraenar, maybe, but not create a wing of humans. As far as the Shadowhawk knew, there had never been humans in the Wing Guard. Clever, Ravania was, but not creative, or particularly courageous when it came to flouting the desires of the royal family. This would look like an insult to Cuinn, if not a humiliation for the entire royal family. It made no sense. Unless it wasn't about Cuinn. Before he could chase that thought any further, the foreigner walked into the yard. His gaze narrowed in on her, searching for any detail that might help him understand why she was here. His first instinct was to laugh. The Twin Thrones had sent a woman. Ravania must be having apoplectic fits. A wing of humans led by a woman to protect a winged prince. Utter insanity. She was being set up to fail. Or someone was. He shook his head to dismiss the multiple variations of that possibility and refocused on her. She was tall for a woman, but what first struck him was that she walked with the same easy grace as one of the winged folk, even though she was clearly human. Her raven hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid pinned at her neck, and the sleeveless vest she wore revealed fair-skinned arms wiry with muscle. It was impossible to tell from this distance what she looked like, but her presence was striking, carrying clearly to any observer. A warrior, most definitely, and something else he couldn't quite name, something dissonant about her, like 2 parts not quite in sync, or something inside her restrained. No, that wasn't it. His frown deepened. It was a puzzle, and one that might provide the key to why she was here if he worked it out. This is winged folk business, it's not for you to worry about. But it was. As much as the winged folk and humans would like to believe otherwise, the lives and well-being of both groups in Mithraenar were inextricably linked. He watched silently, nobody passing his hiding spot, as the foreigner spoke to each of the men in turn, although he couldn't hear what they were saying from such a distance. Their body language spoke volumes, though. None of them wanted to be there. When she dispatched the older man with the training sword, he whistled under his breath at the breathtaking ease with which she did it. Well, you're certainly not just ceremonial. They sent a real warrior. Maybe that was exactly what the Queen had been hoping for. Or not. Again, the sense of unease swept through him. The coming of this woman meant something. He was sure of it. He just needed to work out how whatever it was would affect him and his activities. He couldn't be caught. Capture meant certain death. Confident the foreigner would be occupied for a while, he slipped away from his hiding spot and headed for the guest quarters. Dressed as a servant, clothing stolen on one of his other trips to the citadel, he would claim he'd been sent to clean if he was spotted, but the open walkway outside her room was empty. It was the work of seconds to get inside her locked door, and he closed it quickly behind him, allowing his eyes a moment to adjust to the dimness beyond. The rooms were stark, and even though she'd already been there a day, there was little to suggest anyone lived in them. The cushions on the sofa were untouched, the chair at the desk put neatly away. The bedroom was the only space that looked lived in. Slowly and carefully he went through her few belongings, memorizing where everything had been and ensuring he returned all of it to exactly the same spot. There were several changes of clothes, mostly spare uniforms, some blank parchment and quills, and a small sack of coin. And then, buried right at the bottom of her duffel, a heavy object wrapped in velvet cloth. He took it out, unwrapping the cloth to reveal 2 matching daggers. Their hilts were intricately carved, with tiny emeralds embedded to form a hand grip, and blades the length of his forearm. With those carefully placed emeralds, they'd been designed for one person's hand, their unique grip. The daggers weren't hers. No, you don't carefully wrap your own daggers up in velvet and leave them at the bottom of your duffel. She'd been wearing different weapons earlier too, fork-looking blades he didn't recognize. These daggers weren't hers, but they meant something to her. Carefully he put them back. It was interesting, but it didn't shed any light on why she was here or what her intentions might be. And he'd been here too long. He would need to find another avenue to get the information he needed. And from looking at the men gathered in the barracks earlier, he had an idea about how he might get it. As quietly as he'd come, he left. Okay, that was a nice, short and quick chapter. Drop out here if you don't want any spoilers before I jump onto some author commentary on this very brief chapter. If you're jumping out here, thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it. Chapter 9 shouldn't be much further. Otherwise, let's have a little chat about Chapter 8. Okay, the first of my very valuable author comments is that for those of you who are watching this video on YouTube rather than just through audio, my hair is slightly shorter, and that's because between chapters 7 and 8, I had my hairdresser appointment. So just wanted to solve that mystery for everyone straight up. Chapter 8. So we get the Shadowhawk / Cuinn's first sighting of Talyn, albeit from a distance. And he learns a number of things from that, even though he doesn't really get the answers that he's after, but he does get some interesting snippets of information. So one, the Twin Thrones are sent a serious trained warrior, not just a ceremonial guard, and that could have a number of meanings, but it's interesting for him to know. And of course, as the author writing the Shadowhawk, knowing that he is Cuinn, even though the readers don't yet, or the characters, his song magic is at play, and of course very quickly narrows in on that kind of missing piece of Talyn that kind of was created when Sari died and their bond was torn apart, the Cullinan warrior bond that they had, and that dissonance, that hole is there, that she doesn't even really understand, that is the huge part of the grief that she's feeling. He picks up on that very quickly, even though he doesn't understand what's caused it. He spots Zamaral in the yard, and spoilers for those who know the story know that he recognizes Zamaral from the streets and reaches out to him as a way of getting some inside information on Talyn and what she's doing there and what her purpose is. And then he does a little sneaky search of her room, and he finds nothing of use or interest to him really, but he does find Sari's daggers at the bottom of her bag. The twin daggers being Sari's specialist Cullinan weapon. The Cullinan all have a specialized weapon. Talyn has her twin size, and the daggers were a gift to Sari from Talyn. They're a specialized blades made from Ethlix metal, which is a bit of the backstory that doesn't really come into the series much, but is part of the world. And the emeralds in the hilts of the daggers that are carved or formed essentially around Sari's grip. So They're very precious to Talyn, of course, but they're also painful, and so she's wrapped them up quite lovingly, but left them at the bottom of her bag, I guess, so she doesn't need to see them all the time. But yeah, a nice, quick, short chapter. If you have any questions on it, as always, drop them in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing because that helps me out a lot. But I'm still having fun with this. I hope you are too. I look forward to chapter 9, which will hopefully be soon. All right, have a great day, guys.